welcome to PocketWatch, where we deep dive on the best and worst film and TV this universe has to offer. I'm Stephanie Bendixson, and today we are standing on the outside and looking in at episode 4 of the Disney Plus series WandaVision. Once again, I'm joined by Nick Richardson and Will Yates. Nick, it's nice to see you in Technicolor.
Thank you very much, Steph. Although I am already missing the 50s.
Oh, yeah, I can see why. I can see why. You would just fit right in. Will, you're the biggest devourer of Marvel content since Galactus. Is that true?
I'd say it's about true. I read some Falcon and the Winter Soldier comics, and I ate like half a leftover pizza. So I think I'm good. I think planets are safe for at least the next half an hour.
Okay, well, we're going to do a spoiler warning. Obviously, we're talking about the show. We're kind of deep diving in on plot points and everything. If you haven't seen episode 4, that's the latest episode that's been released. So we're going to be talking about the plot and everything. So if you haven't seen it, obviously save this until you have. As an episode overview, episode 4 was aptly titled We Interrupt This Program. And it was a really huge interruption of everything that we've come to sort of know of the show so far. It flipped the show's perspective, giving us an insight on what's happening in the real world, while Wanda's TV sitcom fantasy has been playing out. So we got to meet sword agent Monica Rambeau, aka Geraldine, 3 weeks before her fated yeetening at the end of Ep3, which she's been freshly reformed after the events of Avengers Endgame. Rambeau was assigned to the investigation of Westview. So it was a really big departure from everything we've seen so far, because finally we got a whole bunch of answers and there was a lot of stuff explained. How did you guys feel about this episode just as soon as it ended?
I am lukewarm on this episode, I feel like. And I don't know if we did get a bunch of answers. And so, yeah, I'm excited to hear what you guys feel like. But for me, this was, I think, it wasn't necessarily the weakest episode, but it was my least favorite.
Were you disappointed that they kind of pulled us out of sitcom land so early, or were you just not feeling the vibe?
I was slightly disappointed that we were pulled out of sitcom, because I feel like they were doing the sitcom thing so well, and that was such a fresh thing to see on television. It was more that when they pulled us out, they pulled me out of a sitcom and just directly into a Reddit thread that I had already been reading, where they just told me all the things that I have already been thinking, but not really extrapolate. I feel like with any new character mystery, it just kind of like, it was this podcast, but it cost $10 million to make. Will, what did you think?
Yeah, it's funny because I'm like on the side of the people that were hoping for a big old Marvel adventure, but I also love my old sitcoms. So this was like an episode that was like, this is the other half of Will, and I was enjoying it for that, for diving a bit more into the Marvel realm and away from the sitcom. But then, yeah, I was kind of loving the train of fun sitcom tropes. So it was a bit disappointing to see how hard of a pivot it was away from that in a single episode.
Well, I guess it doesn't necessarily mean that's the end of the sitcom stuff. Like, we know that there's going to be, even just from the trailer, that there's going to be more sort of sitcom action. I guess that now our sort of suspension of disbelief has been broken more completely. Even though we always knew there was something weird going on, we were kind of happy to just be in that world with her as it was happening. Whereas now, I guess now that we have answers about what's happening on the outside and a little bit more of an understanding of this being a Wanda construct, I guess we won't have the same enjoyment of the sitcom stuff going forward.
What did you think of this one, Steph?
I liked it. I definitely wasn't expecting, this sort of big reveal to happen so soon. But it was very exciting to be given all of those simultaneous moments that were happening, right up until the end of episode 3, when we saw the helicopter drone go in, and Geraldine, who is not Geraldine,
Monica
Rambeau
Monica
Rambeau waking up in the real world, and all of the radio moments, all of those moments that were answered. It was cool to see what was happening on the outside and suddenly piece those two storylines together. And I also appreciated getting that sort of clarification of the timeline. I feel like I didn't know that I wanted those answers so soon, but once I had them, I feel satisfied and curious about where it's going to go from this point on. So I don't know. I quite liked it. I thought it was really exciting.
I think for me, I'm still trying to figure out why it didn't land for me the way that I was expecting it to. And I think part of it is that it feels like the first 3 episodes were this very bold thing to put on television, where we're giving you something very different than what you're used to seeing and really committing to a bit. And then this episode breaks that illusion entirely. That's fine. They had already broken that illusion at sort of like throughout those previous 3 episodes. But it made me realize that the show is being built in the same way as a lot of shows are being built. Like if you look at that sort of mystery box J.J. Abrams thing, where it's like this is this puzzle that is just designed for Reddit to discover. And so therefore this episode coming in and it just felt like it was something that was being slotted in to just confirm a bunch of things that people have already thought about with this show. And none of it felt like it came from a character perspective. It all felt like it came from just like, talking about hexagons, talking about all these people in this town are being cast in this show. It all felt like it was just like, here are these high concepts that you have sort of figured out over the first 3 episodes, and now we're confirming with you this is what's happening. But it's still, it didn't feel like it was coming from a place where I understood anything more about what Wanda is doing. I didn't feel like I understood anything more about what these characters are sort of feeling. It felt very sort of clinical, I guess, that like, yes, this is all the mysteries that you have been thinking about, confirmed, this is what they are. And then I'm like, when we get back into this show, it now feels like episodes 1, 2, and 3, when we figured out those mysteries, I don't actually know what other mystery there is now to be solved. Like, they must have something, but other than why is she doing this? And it seems pretty self-evident given the Vision dead reveal thing that this is her dealing with grief. I'm kind of like, okay, like I just need to wait until this gets played out now. And they save everybody in that town, I guess. And that feels like the kind of thing that should have come at the end of a season rather than right up here. And I'm like, all right, well, what's the mystery now?
Yeah, I think we got some questions answered, but I think there are still, mysteries, and there's still opportunities for them to place twists on things, whether they do that or not. I think for me, the sword shield stuff as a part of the MCU is like the weakest, lamest part of it. But I understand it's kind of a necessary framework for them to exist around. So that stuff for me, I'm just like, all right, I'm happy for it to be there, even though it's not the most interesting part of things. But at the same time, I think I really like the way they kind of are answering questions, but still giving us a sense of Wanda as in a state of turmoil that she has created herself, that we don't really know why. And I feel like there's still heaps of opportunity to go. I just don't think I understand that breaking the illusion early is difficult to kind of deal with in terms of the disappointment of it, but I don't know how long they could have maintained that, because it was kind of in danger of becoming very formulaic, of just watching a sitcom play out and then have a few things at the end that were kind of uneasy and told us, oh, remember, this isn't a sitcom. We've had 3 whole episodes of that kind of thing happening. I feel like at some point we needed to start getting a sense of what this is and what is happening in the real world.
Yeah. I feel like it's almost a sense of just like, oh, well, like for me personally, it's like, I would have loved to have seen more of these things. It's a thing with, I'll reference like Doctor Who, when a companion leaves. I'm like, I'm sure there was some cooler adventures we could have gone along there, but sure, this is going to push the story along. So you just have to accept that part of the story is over and that we've moved on into the next phase of it. So yeah, I agree. It's like they had to get into the, I guess, explanations, but it's definitely, I think, going to change I don't know how to say it, but Vision, specifically, I think as a character moving forward, that's the thing that I'm intrigued to know, you know, whether he now is knowledgeable of the world, if that is going to play into the sitcom. The sitcom is now almost a mini horror. There's still going to be a sitcom, but it's like a bit more twisted.
Yeah.
Throughout the next couple of episodes.
And
I think
no, sorry, I was just going to say with the Vision stuff, the stuff at the end where you see him dead, is the implication there, because Will, I know there was like a cut scene at the end of one of, I think it was Endgame, where you saw Vision's body being put basically into storage.
It was that, and also Wanda was supposedly then going to try and steal the body in the scene. That was
right, she was going to try and steal it.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. So then 100% she is puppeting her dead husband.
Yeah, a bit of Bernie's.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Because I wasn't sure whether or not it was just like she keeps seeing visions of like the last time she saw him. And that was like a horror flash. Whereas if it was implied that she was going to steal the body, they cut that scene because they knew that this was going to be the film and they didn't want to show their hand too early.
Yeah, I feel like the Vision being with the gunshot wound thing in his head was the one thing that I kind of wish that they hadn't put in there because, you know, I liked the whole mystery around, you know, there was even a very like obvious shot of someone writing on a board being like, is Vision dead or alive? You know, is it? So I would have liked that to kind of continue. I guess the questions that we have had answered so far is the kind of timeline confirmation with this sort of, we see what's happening with everyone kind of returning from the blip.
I loved that. I loved that scene.
Yeah. That was really unexpected, and I didn't think we were going to go there. And it was so cool to be like, "Oh my god, of course!"
Yeah.
We saw the you know sword guy crawling through the pipe, and that explains why the beekeeper just popped out of a manhole. The helicopter drone thing we saw, the radio, Wanda, who's doing this to you. We had that, and then. You know, the line, it's Wanda, it's all Wanda. We got confirmation that it's a construct of her mind. No one's doing this to her specifically. Like she's not trapped because someone has her in some kind of mind control experiment or something.
Yeah.
So those were cool answers that we had. But like, we still have questions, I think.
I'm interested because I will say just quickly with the blip stuff, them coming back, I thought that was really cool. I thought that it dealt with it in a really cool way, even though she was like weirdly unaffected by the idea that all these people are materializing in front of her. I was like, I liked the horror element of everybody coming back, which I feel like the universe hasn't dealt with that much. In Spider-Man, it was more like it was a bit more of a joke than anything else. Yeah. So I liked that. I like the idea that when with that like guy climbing through the pipes, they're just being. I figure the beekeeper is significant because it could be the hexagon thing. Like they keep talking about hexagons, and so whether like some sort of beehive situation, but it was also just like you are just being turned into something that is appropriate for this world in the same way as the drone got turned into like a toy helicopter because a drone wasn't invented back then. So it's like this is appropriate for the world that you are now in. But at the end with the it's all Wanda thing, I did start thinking, oh, well, that whole like Mephisto devil stuff that we were talking about last episode, maybe none of that actually applies because maybe it is just literally as simple as it appeared in episode 1, which is this is all just Wanda. And I felt like, again, that takes some of the wind out of the sails of just like what's going on here, because I'm like, well, it's just this is like, I would be very surprised if at the end of this it's not just her dealing with grief in some way. And the only real way that it would surprise me if they turn her full villain because of what's happening here, Will.
But I guess if that's the answer anyway, like wouldn't it be more disappointing to have that reveal at the very end than it is to get it out of the way now and then maybe present you with more questions? Like, Will, do you think the people who infiltrate Westview know what's happening to them when they're in there and they're kind of playing along, or are they just becoming part of the sort of like
I think
ethos of the world?
They're fully casted in this production by Wanda. I think it's not until that illusion breaks that they are aware. I don't think they're playing along. Is that what you mean?
So when she created the world, was it the people that just happened to be in this area just got sucked into it?
It seemed, by the things that they were putting on the boards, it seemed like they were...
Like in the back of their minds, do they know exactly what's happening and they're all playing along? Or are they part of, is she controlling them as part of some kind of like
episode
hypnosis?
3 is the kind of reveal that, they're not playing along. Oh, but then I guess maybe they are, because that did
So
lead
the
it.
B guy goes in there as a sword agent trying to find out what's going on, and then when he wakes up in Westview, he's just like B guy now, and he's part of that world and forgets everything else.
He was completely baffled. He was confused of where he was.
I definitely read that as like the characters are... it's like they're being mind controlled, and they are just, they think that they're those characters, but they're obviously, their subconscious is still there. So then in those moments where she like breaks the glass in episode 3, or episode 2, sorry, or in episode 3 when the neighbor is like drilling through the fence, that's them, their subconscious sort of like floating towards the surface and then having to be fought back down. Because I think if everyone's playing along, they're too good. You've cast an entire town of people, and you're puppeting a dead guy around, and they're all actually most of the time taking it really well. It's not the Truman Show. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess I still think you're right. It could just be a big whole construct of hers to, like deal with grief. But I feel like that hasn't necessarily been answered yet, and there could be a bigger reason for it, I think. I would hope so. I feel like what are the other ways, Will, in which this is kind of connected back to the broader MCU? Because I feel like that was such a huge like Marvel linking episode.
Yeah.
That was in many ways a lot of like fan service and kind of the glue that is supposed to link all of these new properties together, because I feel like we're going to get some thing that's going to attach us to Loki and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously the biggest one, which is almost, at least at the opening, the protagonist of this episode is Monica Rambeau, who was just a young girl in the Captain Marvel film. There's actually a quick bit of Brie Larson.
She gets the jacket.
Yeah. There's even a quick bit of Brie Larson, I think, at the top of the movie where you hear her say Lieutenant Trouble, I think is a little bit. So that was a nice little bit of link back. Obviously, the blip gets referred to quite a lot, which is, I don't know how I feel about that being the name that they gave it. It just kind of makes it a bit more comical.
Yeah.
Like, the snap is like, oh, there's something wrong. But the blip is like...
Yeah.
I did think that.
The blip makes it sound like something really trivial and not traumatizing at all.
Yeah. I did actually think that. I was like, oh, it's weird that they called it the blip. And then my reasoning for it was, well, only like... a very small amount of people in the entire world saw Thanos snap his fingers and really knew what was going on. So, like, if you're CNN and everyone disappears, you didn't know that's because he snapped his fingers. So you just went ahead and called it the first thing that you thought of, and then that just caught on. And then the Avengers come out 2 weeks later. It was like, actually, he snapped his fingers. At the Avengers HQ, we've been calling it the snappening. And they're like, oh, no, we've already called it the blip. I'm sorry. The blip is already a hashtag. We're selling blip t-shirts.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, no, blip is referenced, but and also obviously the biggest thing that gets a full sort of explanation is sword, which I don't know the breakdown of those letters, but it is actually slightly different in the MCU. I think they've changed a few words, which they did with Shield as well. And it's been around since like the 90s, assumedly. Monica's mum, who passed away during the blip, helped found it. And then in the absence of S.H.I.E.L.D. after Winter Soldier, this is all told in about a 30-second chat with some dude we've never met as they walk down a hallway. It kind of grew and took over as the S.H.I.E.L.D. thing. And also that big shot of where it was, I think is like, not NASA, but like something relating to space travel, where you see all the buildings that S.W.O.R.D. is occupying.
Yeah, right.
Which is fun, because it's a space-based organization.
I did see that the acting director, I don't understand why there's still an acting director after like 4 or 5 years of like no director, but yeah, sure. He actually shares a last name. I think it's Hayward. Shares a last name with a character from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. who actually was a Hydra agent. So there is some questioning about whether or not he is a bad man, or if that's just some weird little coincidence. And the other link that it has is that that Wanda is going to be a character in the Doctor Strange in the multiverse of madness. So the second Doctor Strange movie, she's going to be a main character in it. You would assume it is set after the events of this film. And I have seen some speculation that she will be potentially the villain in that film if she goes a full villain arc in this one, because she's always kind of on the edge of like really using her powers to fuck some people up.
She's a very volatile character. And I feel like typically in Marvel, when you have characters that have like psychic-y kind of abilities, they always seem to be like on the brink of madness and could blow at any moment. So it makes sense that they would do that. We also had Kat Dennings in this episode, which was cool to see her back from Thor.
Oh, I feel like because I was going to say we've spoken a lot about that, but we haven't spoken about the fact that most of the time we don't see WandaVision, and we've seen Kat Dennings' character in Agent Wu. I may be the only one. I really do not like Kat Dennings in the Marvel universe. I really don't like that character. I feel like I could see her like smarmy acting her ass off, and I always feel like that character grates against the universe, a universe where humor comes very naturally to a lot of characters. I think there are so many funny characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is quite funny. I never find her funny. I find her very grating. So when she turned up, I was like, oh no, God, she's going to be here the whole time. But I may be the only one.
I don't mind her. I agree. I think Kat Dennings is one of those actors who just plays herself and everything. Yeah. So she is a little bit one note in that respect, but I find it really hard to take a lot of the like Marvel serious stuff seriously. And it all feels like I find it a bit hilarious when they're all like walking through facilities and they're talking about like, you know, how they're using all of their like professional government CIA type dialogue with each other and stuff, and putting their weird helicopter drones up that look like toys anyway. To me, it kind of like it brings some levity to all of that and makes me feel like they're not taking it so seriously, and it kind of gives me like a sigh of relief in a way. Otherwise, I feel like I'm laughing at it as opposed to like, I don't know. So I don't mind her. She does have a very nasal, annoying voice, but I think as a character, she does a good job. And Agent Wu, I forget that actor's name, but from Fresh Off the Boat, like he's amazing. Also,
he was great. Like I was really happy to see him back from Ant-Man. He's great in everything he's in. Yeah. And so, do we think that moving forward, it's going to be sort of like a 50-50 split, or are we going back to this? Do we think we're going back to like full sitcom for a couple more episodes and then another like Reddit thread episode and then a full sitcom again?
I don't think you can go back to full sitcom at this point. Now that people have been, that the curtain has been open to what's happening on the other side, we're going to have dual sitcom and exterior stuff happening simultaneously. Yeah, as they try to sort of infiltrate Westview more and more and figure out what's going on and how to stop it. And you might be right in that the culmination of it is, Wanda going
full villain,
sort of implodes or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, while I don't necessarily want it to be like emotional woman gets so emotional that she kills entire town, I do think that there's probably for me, that could be the most interesting story to tell here that is still surprising, is that, we've seen her so far resistant to the idea of people coming in and trying to break this illusion for her. And then if we start seeing Sword really trying to get into this town and her starting to genuinely unleash, and if she's like, this is my only chance at having the kind of life that I've wanted my entire life, then that to me feels like at least an earned reason why she would go full big bad. And once you then blow up a town of people, then I feel like that's a difficult thing to come back from, and she would make a really interesting villain, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, like, you look at Endgame, she just landed and could have killed Thanos.
Totally.
Like, if Thanos hadn't gone, no, call the army, like, Thanos was gone.
Yeah, like she was
fixed. It was fine.
She was the one person that like was basically there. Like she has been arguably the most powerful character in the MCU, and so if she is allowed to genuinely unleash, then I think that would be interesting to see.
Yeah, I think the questions that I still have are how are Sword going to go about infiltrating a place where, as soon as someone goes in there, they become kind of taken over by these characters and can't act autonomously.
Yep.
Well, some of them maybe can have moments, but don't seem to be lucidly aware of what's happening all the time. And then the other question I suppose I have is why has if this is a trauma response and it's like her fantasy land to kind of deal with Vision's death, why has it taken the form of this sitcom? If she's from Sokovia, like an American TV sitcom seems like an odd thing for her to kind of default to. I guess maybe it's still a global ideal.
I mean, this is part of my problem, I guess, which is a lot of these answers I feel like come from the outside, not from the inside. So I read an interview with the showrunner where he said that the idea is that Wanda watched a lot of reruns of American sitcoms in the same way that, like, in Russia, they were watching The Nanny in 2000. Like, it's that sort of thing.
Right.
But I think that's part of the thing for me where I'm like, that's not information that we learnt through Wanda and her yearning to, like, we know that she grew up on this stuff and she wants this perfect family and stuff. It's things that are coming in from interviews with directors to Vanity Fair and that sort of thing that we then put as part of our sort of deductive argument on the outside of this show. And then the show it's almost like the show is just a piece of the actual puzzle, and the puzzle is the big argument mystery that we're putting together as viewers, and the show is a piece of that, as opposed to the show is all of it and we're just on the outside, like, watching it happen. Like, you need to have known that for that to make sense. Otherwise it's like you and you're sitting there going, oh, it's weird that she's going through American sitcoms when she's from sort of like Central Europe.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose they could like fix that with flashbacks and stuff, but then that feels very ham-fisty, like information that they kind of drop for the sake of explaining the creative choice that they've made.
There's also like in having Agent Wu and Kat Dennings' character, they're almost the two sides of the coin. Kat Dennings the whole time, she's like, it's a sitcom. Like, what are you asking about? It's fine. It's just a sitcom. So even in this episode, because it is the Reddit episode, you almost have the two sides of the argument of like, it doesn't matter, just watch it. And Wu's like, no, but we need to know why. And she's like, it's just a show.
Yeah, that's true. And I did say
it is what it is.
I really did love the fact that because I was watching with my partner and after it ended, and I think we had this conversation on the last episode, it was like, is this a sitcom? Or are we watching this as are they actually inside a sitcom, or are we just viewing it through like the medium of a sitcom, but what's happening in the show is kind of like happening really. And I love the fact that the kind of twist is that, no, this is actually, they're watching a sitcom. Like when she was like, there's a TV broadcast in here, I was like, okay, I didn't know that you would go there entirely, that it's like, you're acknowledging how batshit insane this is. That it's she's made a she sourced a laugh track. Like, all of this is you could sit back and watch this, and that's very strange. And I think that's the kind of I love that they went there and actually went, when they went in there, they weren't like, oh god, it's just like a sort of idyllic 1950s neighborhood. Like, they actually go, no, it's an episode of a TV show and there's editing. Like,
So I guess with those moments where you see they're like, where when Kat Dennings' character is watching the sitcom and she sees those edited moments, we're assuming that that's Wanda, the editor, who doesn't want those moments to be breaking through the veneer of this kind of perfect world she's created.
Yeah, assumedly. I think there's a quick line of like, who's the editor or something, but the end line of Monica being like, it's all Wanda, I feel like answers that kind of element.
Yeah, she's an auteur.
Yeah.
Was there any, I noticed that the sitcom had credits at the end. Is there any kind of, surely there's something to the credits at the end of the show? Like
the snazzy, like Marvel-y kind of looking credits? Like the cool looking ones? Because the one repeated thing in that is that we go through Vision's eye. That's like the major element that a lot of people are discussing. But I don't think there's much intrigue in them. I think they're just credits, but also they're not looking.
But like the credits of the sitcom itself, not the credits of the broader show.
There weren't
names.
There was.
But yeah,
there wasn't in this one. I've got it up here now because at the end it kind of like she goes, "What should we watch on TV?" Which again feels like totally us. But there's the sort of there wasn't opening credits because we were kind of like this was still last week's TV show episode. Even though we got some new information within it, it wasn't like a new show. So we had that stuff last week.
I liked that so many of the characters in the sort of real world were asking the same questions as us. I feel like, do you think the fact that she's moving through decades is her kind of moving through stages of acceptance, and when she gets up to the present date, then that's kind of when she will work through whatever she's going through in her mind and come to some sort of resolution? Or is it just that this would keep on going forever until somebody stops it?
it's a very good point because they are going to end. Like she is going to run out of decades.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's moving through
unless it just kind of
daily
loops back around and she stays stuck in a time loop forever for as long as television has existed.
That is interesting because I haven't seen too much about we know why she's picked these shows and that that's sort of like, we think we do idyllic families, but like why we're burning through different decades. I don't see her working towards any sort of acceptance resolution. Like she's still in denial. We're 3 episodes into denial. So I think that for me, the most dramatically interesting thing is that she stays in denial until outside forces come in and kind of shake her out of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. Well, I guess we'll find out going forward. I hope so. I hope there's more of a twist on top of the answers that we've been given already, because we still have quite a few episodes to go, and having this big reveal happen at this point could be awesome, or it could turn out to be kind of disappointing. So I guess we'll see. I'm super excited, and I feel like it's just made me more excited about the show. But I can see why, like maybe for some people, it's kind of like pulling back the curtain too early. Yeah. Do you guys have any other thoughts?
No, I'm excited for next week's episode. I'm excited to see what we assume will be back into sitcom world, and to sort of see where
the 80s?
Yeah, and where this sort of like what they do with the idea of the mystery that they're setting up here. So I still am on board with the show. I'm just slightly worried now that it is as simple as it appeared at the end of episode 1. So, but hopefully they have a couple more tricks up their sleeve.
There's 2 kids there. We gotta find out about those kids.
We gotta find out about those kids.
Yeah.
What's up with those kids?
Babies.
Yeah.
They're gonna be teenagers next week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, maybe.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. Wow. Cool. Well, I guess that's it for this Pocket Watch on WandaVision episode 4. We'll be back next week. We really hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, make sure you check out our Patreon at patreon.com/backpocket and become a sponsor. And for the podcasters, if you could give us a review on your podcasting platform of choice, that would go a really long way of us. So thanks for watching/listening. Nick, Will, thanks for the chat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.